For the final social club this week, we're going to do a little transfer roundup, talk about a few different things going on. We're going to start with Leroy Sane, who is in Manchester. Looks like he's going to make a £37 million move to Man City. And this one's been in the pipeline for a while, Oz.
Yes, apparently since 2013. He's been one of their transfer targets. Because they've been looking to build a certain kind of system there for a while, right?
That's an early spot, isn't it? If he's 20 now, spot that when he's 17.
Well, I mean, you're always going to have a lot of scout. I think Man City have got a scouting network of people who know what they want. At the same time, I think they identify players or there are going to be other people in the game that have identified players such as Pep, Barcelona, those sort of guys. You look at where they're going to fly, and then you fly to the same places and go and take a look at the players.
Like last season, he scored 8 in 33 games,
which is a good record for someone playing that position.
You'd think that's not the kind of doesn't warrant a £37 million move, but Pep Guardiola is not going to buy players that don't fit in his system, and he's perhaps sees something that in Sane that will fit perfectly in his first 11.
It's certainly going to be
and
better
that's why he's going to go and spend the money.
It's strange that that's a given now that Guardiola can't get a signing wrong.
I think it's more the anticipation of what he's going to do with him. So, for instance, Arsenal this season are looking to sign Mustafi and people like that, and people sort of go, yeah, solid signing. But if Klopp signed, I don't know, whoever, Mane, then people, oh my God, that's perfect for Klopp. Or, there are a number of different signings. There are a number of different managers who sort of have that anticipation around them, and Pep's one of them.
I do worry about City if they get Stones as well, because I think Pep's the perfect manager for a defender like Stones to really get the confidence to play. But it'll be good for England.
Oh, you worry from your perspective,
from
City's perspective.
Not from my selfish United perspective. I think he'll be a wonderful, wonderful signing for them. Hopefully they don't get it.
Stones smacks as someone who needs to be coached properly. He's great. Yeah. You can see the raw potential, but he's still raw, a very rough diamond.
He's in the right place then, surely, with Koeman.
Yeah. I wouldn't be bad if he stayed there, in my opinion.
So no development credits go to Martinez at all for Stones being a player that's now muted at 50 million?
I think a lot of people
come from somewhere.
Well, I mean,
his potential comes from his potential.
He was within the side, and I think a lot of people also sort of think, well, whoever was there at the time is going to play him. And I think a lot of people. Know that. Well, I think the bigger issues came with him was his positioning when he was around other players. So sort of he left a few gaps at the back, those sort of things. The problem was that can be coached into you, whereas his footwork and those sort of things, I think, are what people are excited about, and that his confidence on the ball, the kind of things that people consider to be natural assets for a player.
I think also with Stones is that if he goes to Man City, he'll play in a team that fits that kind of player because they're going to have the ball all the time. It's a player like Rio Ferdinand, who's at Man United, amazing at Man United, they had the ball all the time, he could come out with the ball. Comes to QPR, knows at the end of his career, he didn't suit a team that was down the bottom. So that's part of it. It's horses for courses. With both of those, both obviously very young, does that make you feel like there won't be that huge amount of pressure on Guardiola to win the league this year if he's going to let those players come in and let them actually start?
Guardiola's never going to bring in old players because he wants a coach. They have to play in a system that requires intelligence, but also requires a mind that's easily moulded. It's the same reason Pochettino buys young players at Spurs, because getting Ibrahimovic to work in a different system than he's used to is just not going to happen. And it's the same reason why Mourinho is not necessarily a great coach, but a good manager, in that he knows how to make specialist players work in a system, whereas
is that to be applauded a little bit though, that you've got Man City got all this money, but they're allowing him to do it the right way. They're not just trying to get someone now and get it done so he can win the league. That's the pressure that's on Mourinho.
They've been preparing for that for a while though, haven't they? I mean, everything is built towards their moment with Pep. For years they've been basically saying, look, we've made a bed for you, come lie in it, and now he's there. Yeah. Of course they're going to let him do whatever he wants, right? Yeah. And I think to some extent they trust his process, and they're just going to go with it. So if he said he wanted to sign, 5 players,
it's a ballsy move by City, I suppose, when you say it like that they literally have been laying down the plans for years with the end game of getting this manager, and they've got the manager.
Yeah, but I mean, if I suppose they were always confident that they were going to be able to woo him in a way. I suppose there must have been something verbally,
There has to have been, hasn't there?
Yeah. So let's go Man City. I don't want to go to Man City. How much?
Yeah, well,
all right.
It is unusual.
How many zeros?
With those signings, well, that means that's the death of Nasri, is it?
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
I think his bleach blonde hair was the.
It's just a pig. on the pitch.
That poor guy.
Yeah.
And also, I think apparently, Clichy's interview was very interesting and revealing, wasn't it? With where he sort of said no more pizza. Certain senior players aren't even allowed to.
No more pizza. They shouldn't have pizza in the. How much pizza were they eating?
Sorry, what?
Yeah, but last season Ranieri's motivation was pizza for the players, and people were sort of like, oh, fucking brilliant. So, I think the difference is that he's saying there are certain players that aren't even allowed to play with, even train with the first team squad yet, because they're not even up to that level, and that's definitely just him going, Nasri's not fit enough yet.
Yeah, you know what Redknapp did after when he took over from Ramos? First thing he did was plonk a bottle of ketchup down on the table, because apparently that was taken away because they were too overweight. Just
and like that,
just like that. Results. They did. It picked up immediately.
Anyway, ketchup, come on.
Lukaku to Chelsea, possibly. Everton want 75 million for him. They haven't offered that much yet. This is another one. Is this going to become more and more commonplace where you've got Pogba who was allowed to go and then came back?
There's only so many instances of it.
There's 2 so far in quick succession.
Who else?
Chelsea have got. The question is, is it going to become more frequent?
Chelsea have got a whole list.
You sarky bastard.
Yeah, no, but Chelsea have got a whole list of players they could sign back, haven't they?
Yeah.
Cleverly back to Manchester United.
Yeah. They had 21 million. Apparently around that number that they should get back if he was sold to someone else. So does that just get wiped off?
What you mean, Everton are still owe?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is it 54 million that Chelsea are signing for?
Yeah. Well, that's either way. It sounds like if that's a clause in the contract, then that number, that 75 million, which I think, I don't know. That's a question maybe to ask you guys. Is he worth 75?
It's impossible to value a player these days anymore. Literally, the value
for a good few years now,
the value of a player is how much that club wants him. That's how you marginalise.
How much are you willing to pay? That's the value of the player. It doesn't. It
can't go any further than that anymore because it's been so bastardised and distorted by the funds that are in it that a fee 10 years ago, now when you try and compare it, it is literally impossible to compare. It's unfair because the context is so different.
There are indexes for comparing those sorts of things. And then there is also the idea of wages as well, because Lukaku's not going to go back for tiny wages, is he?
No.
Yeah.
So you can kind of offset different costs. It's not just 75 million done. 75 million plus, 20 over the lifetime of his contract?
It would put Lukaku in a really powerful position in terms of wages, because to the club that sold him, you now want me back. Well, I want this.
For the record, I think Lukaku's he's one of my favourite strikers. I love him. I would absolutely love him at Spurs if he could start and we could afford 75 million. Lukaku's one. I just think it's just superb.
I think he's awesome as well.
Yeah, he's unreal.
So Chelsea will be buying a player that, if not improves their first team, actually bolsters their squad, but I don't really think they need him. I don't think they need to spend 75 million unless Costa is on his way out.
I do think that's the problem with Costa for them, is that even if he does stay in the squad, there are still worries that in a Conte system he's not going to be able to last that amount of time, just from sheer emotional exhaustion. He already emotionally exhausts himself. Imagine having Conte on the side of that.
Screaming over,
just adding into that.
And finally, we've got to talk about Hull.
Do we?
13 players. They've got at the moment 5 players out injured, a lot of them with long-term injuries.
No manager.
Another Diarmi apparently on his way out as well, so that makes 12 going into a Premier League season. The chairman doesn't want to. He's trying to sell the club, and he doesn't want to splash out any cash because it's wasted money for him. He sees, but
Spurs won the league in '61 with 14 players, so.
It can happen.
Chin up, lads.
It's a very good point. Yeah.
How would you feel if you're a Hull City
terrified?
fan?
As fans, you'd feel very upset because you also sort of think, well, how's he going to sell the club if they are no longer a club? If you can't field a team, what happens in the Premier League?
How do you engineer a successful season in the Championship and it fall apart so quickly?
Well, it obviously shows that was. He obviously knows how tough it must be to stay in the Premier League, and then they've gone down. He's gone, and then been able to get back up. And now he's like, look, just someone else take it.
Do you think that he's not motivated because he's still at odds with the fan base? Like, how motivated are you going to be to provide?
I imagine it does beat you down a little bit. Yeah. I know. So with QPR, when we went up, Briatore and Eccleston then wanted to sell the club and wouldn't buy any players. So we went into the first game of the season with the 3 players we bought were Gabadon, DJ Campbell and Jay Bothroyd, because he didn't want to spend any money. But we had someone in the pipeline and it looked like it was going to be done. And we just about got away with it because at the end of the transfer window we were able to sign 4 or 5 players, Joey Barton, players like that.
Thank God for Clint Hill.
Thank God for Clint Hill.
Yeah.
And we were able to get it away with it that year. But God knows what would have. Well, I say God knows.
Well, you would have gone down.
Football goes on. Well, yeah, we would have gone down and got on with it then. But for Hull City fans who are probably a bit like QPR, some QPR fans, they sort of went up, went down, went up, went down. You kind of almost get used to being in that exciting world and you start to believe that you are definitely a Premier League club, and it doesn't work like that. So the scary thing for them is that it looks like they should go down because they've only got 13 players, and that's not good enough for a squad.
Is there not a point where the Premier League goes, hold up, Hull, like you've only got 12 players, like you can't be a Premier League club, or they're just going to flood their squad?
Or they're just going to leave. If you bring youth in, then you're fine.
You have to use your squad, but what will happen is that they probably will bring in around 8 or 9 players. They won't be good enough because they've been scrabbling around. Agents will be aware that they're desperate for players. They'll overpay.
Sure. But they won't though. They won't overpay because he's not willing to invest any money.
There's going to be a standoff there. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, surely there's like a fit and proper sort of thing that comes in here where you need to reassess whether the owner is then fit and proper to be able to own the club.
Yeah.
And if not, then what happens after that? I mean, there are other sporting organisations in the world that have got something in place, which is basically you can't own the club if you're not going to run it properly. But he's not running it properly.
I don't know. I mean,
maybe they've got a plan.
Let us know. But I think you've got you have that initial test that if you're fit and proper, which anyone seems to be able to pass, and then you're left to your own devices to a point. Blackpool, their problems. Someone would have come in a long time ago and sorted that out, but it wasn't able to be. But that's the reason why Steve Bruce has gone. Zola has been linked with them. Martinez has been linked with them, and Bradley, the American manager.
Bob Bradley. I mean, that would be a shame because Bob Bradley probably deserves a better step up than going to Hull. And you'd also think, why would you touch that?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Do you just to try and get in that new world? Do you try and?
But I think Bradley's probably already being assessed by those guys, and all those managers are probably managers that if there was a job free, you'd at least look at them as an option. So why go to an option where you're doomed to fail?
Is it one of those where you go, I'll take it anyway, just to get myself back in it, and if it fails, it's because
I don't think that any of them are that desperate for that, though.
Yeah, I don't think that's a clever move.
But the longer you're away from the game, the harder it will be to be involved. We all often there was a period of time where Alan Kirby should be linked with every job because he hadn't had a job for 3 weeks. So as soon as a manager, next job that's available, Steve Bruce will be the front runner. Because he's the first one in your mind.
Remy Gard did that risk, just took that risk of Villa, and we probably will never hear from him ever again. He's been locked away.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is he can go back to France and still, and he'll be absolutely fine.
It's kind of out of the public eye, I suppose.
So for Bradley, I think it's worth giving a go, is it not?
Well, what would you do as Brad? Like, what's his press?
Go back to America.
What's his press conference? You could always go back to
That's not what I'm saying.
What's his press conference like though? So you've got 13 players and you've just lost another one.
I think you maybe need an American because those speeches that galvanise people.
Yeah.
In an American accent, they're way better.
I see your point.
I think what were the best.
You would know with that haircut. What is it like to be American?
What is this that American is haircut?
You were there, man.
It's a buzz cut, right?
You got a claw by your fingernails.
The best case scenario for Hull is that they have a player, they have a manager lined up, and a number of deals in the pipeline, and that's the best case scenario. The reality is it's probably not true. And they'll probably get relegated with the lowest points title in history, currently held by Derby with 12 points, I think.
Was it 12 or was it 10? Oh.
11.
Let us know.
Not many.
Was Robbie Savage part of that side?
Yeah. He was.
Yeah. Good. I mean, that explains everything, doesn't it? Yeah. Robbie Savage could go and play for Hull. I mean, that would be...
I don't know why.
Just looking for the cash.
Should we round it up?
Let's round it up. So that's this week's Social Club. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know what you think about all of these transfers.
Chris and Paul are back next week.
Yeah.
Are they back from the States?
Yeah, they just got back.
Oh, that'd be good.
So if this has been a chore for you, next week you got them back, so don't worry about it.
It was fine.